My name is Jimmy Bellamy, and I'm 28 years old. 3 weeks before Forbes put my face on their cover, my own father pointed at the door of his anniversary party and called me the Bellamy family disgrace. 18 relatives went quiet. You play with fake internet money on a computer, he said. You are an embarrassment to 3 generations of doctors. Get out. I set my untouched champagne on the table and walked out without a word. What none of them knew, not one person in that beautiful room, was that the dropout they pitted had quietly built a company worth $42 million under a name they'd never connect to me. 3 weeks later, the whole hospital where my father operates would be whispering that same name. And the daughter he threw out of his party would be the one on the magazine everyone was passing around. The invitation came in a cream envelope with my mother's handwriting on the front, and the paper was thicker than anything the post office sells. I knew what that meant before I opened it. Eleanor Bellamy only buys the heavy stock for events she plans to photograph. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a family measures a person. My father, Richard, has opened more than 4,000 human hearts. He will tell you that number himself, usually before dessert. My mother reads internal medicine journals at the breakfast table the way other people read the news. My sister Victoria, 34, was already a neurosurgeon by the time I finished high school. My little brother Nathan was the golden boy, groomed for Harvard Medical, which he'd start at 24. And then there was me, Jimmy, the one who got into medical school like the rest of them, and then in my 3rd year in 2022, walked out. I remember the phone call I made to my father from the parking lot of the anatomy building. My hands were steady. His voice was not. You're throwing away 3 generations, he said. For what? Computers? For something I believe in, I said. The line went quiet for a long time. Then, very softly, he said, we'll see how long that lasts. And he hung up. What none of them ever asked was what I was actually building. That's the part that still sits under my ribs. Nobody asked. For 3 years after that, I sat at the children's table. I mean that literally. At Thanksgiving, at Easter, at every dinner in the house on Linden Court, there was a long table with the good china and a smaller round one near the kitchen. My place card was always on the round one, next to whichever cousin was under 10. I was 25, then 26, then 27, cutting turkey beside a booster seat. My mother had a way of introducing me that I came to dread. She would rest her hand on my shoulder, tilt her head at whichever colleague she was performing for, and say, and this is Jimmy. She's still finding her path. Then a small laugh, the kind that invites everyone else to laugh with her. I learned to laugh too. It was easier than the alternative. My father simply stopped meeting my eyes. Across a table, in a hallway, his gaze would slide past me to Victoria, to Nathan, to anyone with a stethoscope in their future. I existed in his peripheral vision. A smudge he'd trained himself not to focus on. And through all of it, I had my laptop. That silver laptop went everywhere with me. At every family dinner, once the medical shop talk started, I'd open it in the corner and disappear into the screen. Victoria used to smirk at it. Look, Jimmy's gaming again, she'd say, and my mother would sigh like I was a teenager. They genuinely believed I was playing games. Not one of them ever leaned over to look at what was actually on that screen. Lines of security code, user growth charts climbing hour by hour, and an email signature that read, simply, J.M. Bellamy. That name meant nothing to them. It would come to mean a great deal. I never corrected the gaming joke. I'll be honest, there were nights I wanted to. There were nights I sat in my apartment at 2 a.m, watching a number climb on that screen, and I picked up my phone to text my father, and then I set it back down. Because I'd made myself a promise. If I ever built something real, it would be mine. Not a thing I had to prove to them. A thing that was simply true whether they clapped or not. So I said nothing. For 3 years I said nothing. Then the cream envelope came. 35 years of marriage. Cocktails at 6, dinner at 7 at the house on Linden Court. And inside, in my mother's careful cursive, a note. We do hope you'll come, Jimmy. Please dress appropriately. Please dress appropriately. I read that line twice. Then I set the card face up on my kitchen counter and finished my coffee slowly, watching the steam thin out over the sink. I called Maya that night, my co-founder, the only person on earth who knew both of my names. "You don't have to go," she said. "You know that." "I know," I said. "I'm going anyway." Jimmy. A pause on the line. 2 weeks. You realize what happens in 2 weeks.
Ido.
I closed my eyes. That's exactly why I'm going. Because 2 weeks before that party, I'd already said yes to something else. Something I hadn't told a single member of my family. But that's the next part of the story. I put on the dark green dress. I did my hair. I looked in the mirror, and I knew, with a calm that surprised me, that tonight was the last time. And I was right. The valet took my keys, and I walked up the stone steps of the house on Linden Court alone. The door was open. It always was for parties. My mother believed a closed door made guests feel like they were interrupting something. Inside, the foyer smelled of lilies and warm champagne, that faintly sweet, slightly sour smell of alcohol that has been sitting out too long. Candles floated in glass bowls along the staircase. Somewhere a string quartet was playing something my father had probably chosen himself. 18 people. I counted them the way I count everything. Aunts, cousins, 2 of my father's old colleagues from the cardiac unit, my grandmother in her wheelchair by the fireplace. And, at the center of it, the 2 round tables. The big one, dressed in white linen, silver, the good crystal. And the smaller one near the kitchen door, where a high chair had once lived when the cousins were babies. That was where my place card was. Jimmy. In my mother's careful handwriting. "There she is," my mother said, gliding over. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Jimmy, sweetheart, you found something to wear." She looked at my dress the way you'd look at a resume with a typo. "Sit down, we're almost ready." I sat at the small table, next to a 9-year-old cousin who was watching cartoons on a phone under the tablecloth. Across the room, Victoria was holding court. My sister had a way of talking with her hands, the surgeon's hands, and everyone leaned toward them. And the tumor was pressing right on the brainstem, she was saying. 11 hours. 11. But he woke up and knew his own name. That's the whole job right there. My father lifted his glass. His face was already flushed, the top button of his collar open. "That's a Bellamy," he said. "That's what a Bellamy does." For 1,000 hearts I've opened, and I raised her to open more. The table murmured its approval. Nathan, 24, home from Harvard, poured the next round. My father put a hand on his shoulder and told the colleagues, "This one starts his rotations in the fall. 3rd generation of surgeons in this house, and God willing a 4th. Nathan smiled, but I saw him glance at me. He was the only one who did. I ate my salad. I refilled the 9-year-old Sprite. I have never in my life felt more like furniture. Here is the thing no one in that room knew. 2 weeks earlier, an email had arrived that I had not spoken about out loud to a single soul in my family. I had read it maybe 40 times. I knew, sitting at that little table, exactly what was going to happen to all of these people in 21 days, and it made me very, very calm. That calm is the part one wants you to remember. It was not the calm of someone who had given up. It was the calm of someone who had already won, and was waiting for the room to find out. Dinner came. Then my father stood to make a toast to 35 years, and somewhere in the middle of it, holding his glass, he turned and looked at me. I think it was the wine. I think he had simply seen me, and it annoyed him that I existed at his beautiful table. "You know," he said, to the whole room, not to me, "everyone here has done something. Everyone." His voice was loud and slow. "Victoria saves lives. Nathan is going to save lives. And my other daughter," he gestured with a glass, champagne slopping over the rim onto the linen. "My other daughter plays with fake money on her computer." A laugh started somewhere. My cousin's mother. "Richard," my mother said softly, "don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene." He was fully turned to me now. "I'm asking a question. 3 years. 3 years of sitting in this house on a laptop like a teenager, taking money from strangers on the internet, playing pretend. You had it. You were in your 3rd year. You walked out of medical school in 2022 like it was nothing. You could have been standing where your sister is standing." He set the glass down hard. You are the Bellamy family disgrace. And I am done pretending you're not. The quartet had stopped. I could hear the ice settling in a bucket by the wall. He pointed at the door. If you can't respect what this family is, you can leave my house. I want to tell you that something broke in me. It didn't. I had already left this house, in every way that mattered, a long time ago. I picked up my champagne. The flute I had not yet touched, the bubbles gone flat and small. I looked at it. Then I set it back down, still full, on the white linen. Thank you for dinner, I said. My voice came out level. That surprised even me. Happy anniversary, Mom. Dad. I stood, pushed in my chair. It scraped once on the stone floor, the only sound in the room, and I walked out. Behind me, somebody chuckled, that low chuckle people do when they think the awkward part is over. My mother said something bright and false about dessert. Only my Uncle George moved. 66, the carpenter, the one my father called the one who works with his hands like it was a diagnosis. He half rose from his seat at the far end, his mouth open like he wanted to say my name. I gave him a small shake of the head. Don't. He sat back down, and his eyes followed me all the way to the door. I did not cry in the driveway. I have thought about that a lot since. I got in my car and I put my hands on the wheel, and I breathed. Then my phone lit up on the passenger seat. One new email, sitting at the top of the screen, the one I had been keeping to myself for 2 weeks. The sender was Forbes. I didn't open it in the car. I drove home first, both hands on the wheel, the city sliding past in wet streaks of red and green. The email could wait 4 more minutes. It had waited 3 years. Let me tell you what my family thought was a game. In the spring of 2022, I sat in a lecture hall at Weill Cornell and watched a professor draw the coronary arteries on a whiteboard, and I felt nothing. Not fear, not doubt, just the quiet certainty of a person standing in the wrong room. That night I withdrew from my 3rd year. I had $49,000 saved from tutoring and a summer at a hedge fund, and a spreadsheet I'd been building at 2 in the morning for 8 months. I called Maya Chin the next day.
So you actually did it, she said.
I could hear her chewing something. You're really out. I'm out. Good. Because I've been reading the code you sent me, and either you're an idiot or we're going to be very rich. Maya was a security engineer who had quit a job most people would kill for. We met on a forum arguing about wallet vulnerabilities at 3 a.m., and within a month we were building the thing that would become VaultChain, infrastructure that kept people's digital money from being stolen. I put in $50,000. She put in her savings and her reputation. We rented nothing. We worked out of her apartment in Long Island City with a radiator that clanged like a struck pipe every 20 minutes. Here is the part nobody in my family will ever understand. I chose the name J.M. Bellamy on purpose. Not to hide, exactly. To be clean. If VaultChain worked, I wanted it to belong to me and to no one's expectations. Not the daughter of the cardiac surgeon with more than 4,000 operations behind him. Not the disappointment who fled medicine. Just J.M. Bellamy, a name that could have belonged to anyone, a name that could not be traced back to a girl at the children's table. I wanted to be judged by what I built, and only that.
We almost died twice.
The first time was month 9, when a competitor shipped our exact feature 2 weeks before we did. I remember sitting on Maya's floor with the laptop hot against my knees, the radiator clanging, doing the math on how many weeks of rent we had left. 6. We had 6. We rebuild it better, Maya said. This week. We slept 4 hours a night for 11 days. When we shipped, we were faster, and we were safer, and something turned. People started telling other people. That's the only marketing that has ever mattered. By the end of the 2nd year, we had crossed a number I used to whisper to myself just to believe it, 3.3 million users. Not signups. Users. Real people trusting us with real money. We filed patents until the paperwork became a second job, 18 of them, each one a small stone laid in a wall no one could kick down. And the portfolio I'd built quietly on the side, reinvesting everything, had grown into a figure I checked once, and then didn't check again for a week, because it frightened me. $42.5 million. I want to be honest about the meanest thing I did. I could have told them. At any holiday dinner, I could have set down my fork and said what I was. I chose not to. When my mother introduced me as still finding her way, I let her. When my father wouldn't meet my eyes, I let him keep his comfortable little story. I told myself I was protecting the work. Maybe I was protecting the day I imagined it all coming out. Then, 2 weeks before the anniversary, the email came. I read it standing in my kitchen, and I read it 3 times before the words held still. A writer at Forbes, polite and precise, saying my name had been selected for the 30 under 30 list in the finance category. They wanted a photograph. A real one. My face, full frame, next to my legal name, Jimmy Bellamy, with JM. Bellamy printed right beside it. The two halves of me finally welded together in a magazine that sat in every waiting room in America, including, I thought, one on the east side of Manhattan with my father's name on the door. I typed yes. I didn't hesitate. My thumb hovered for half a second, then pressed send, and something in my chest let go that had been clenched for 3 years. I called Maya to tell her. She went quiet on the line for a long moment, and I heard her set down her mug. "You understand what happens now," she said. "This isn't a blog post we can edit. Your face, your real name, everywhere. Your family, your father's hospital, everyone who ever laughed at you, they'll all see it on the same morning." I know.
No, Jimmy.
Listen to me. Her voice dropped, careful, the way you speak to someone standing near an edge. Once this prints, you don't control the story anymore. You think you do. You don't.
I smiled at that.
I actually smiled. I thought I understood exactly what I was walking into. I had underestimated those words by more than I can say. The magazine went live at 6 a.m. Eastern on a Tuesday. I know the exact minute because I was already awake, sitting on the floor of my apartment in Long Island City with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched, watching the little embargo timer Maya and I had circled on a shared calendar 3 weeks earlier. 2 weeks I had held that Forbes email in a locked folder and told no one but her. 6 o'clock came. Nothing happened for about 90 seconds. Then my phone made a sound I had never heard it make, not a chime, but a kind of steady, mechanical stutter, notifications stacking on notification faster than the screen could clear them. I set the coffee down on the hardwood. I picked up the phone. There I was. My own face, in a gray blazer, shot in a studio in Chelsea 2 weeks before the party. Under it, J.M. Bellamy, 28, founder and CEO, Vault Chain. And beside the pen name in smaller type, the line I had approved and then tried very hard not to think about, legal name, Jimmy Bellamy. Both names, side by side, in print, for 3.3 million users and everyone else to read. Maya called before I could put it down. I answered and held the phone 6 inches from my ear. "Do you see it?" she was shouting. "Jimmy, do you see it? Finance. Not tech, finance. We're in the finance list. I see it. 18 patents. They put the 18 patents in the copy. I told the fact-checker twice, and she stopped. Took a breath, I could hear. "You okay?" I looked at the timer, still counting up now, useless. "I don't know yet," I said. That was the honest answer. Somewhere across town, in a house on Linden Court, a magazine was about to arrive that no one had ordered. Here is the thing about a secret you keep for 3 years. You imagine the moment it breaks 100 different ways, and in every version you are the one who chooses to break it. You are standing up. You are holding the announcement. You are in control of the sentence. I was in control of nothing. I had signed a release, and the release had done the rest. The story was out in the world walking on its own legs, and it would walk straight into every room I had been thrown out of. By 8:15, my Aunt Carol, Richard's cousin's wife, a woman who once introduced me at Thanksgiving as the artistic one, had tagged my mother in a Facebook post. Someone forwarded me the screenshot before I even found it myself. It said, under the cover image, "Eleanor Bellamy, is this your Jimmy? We had no idea. Congratulations to the whole family." 3 exclamation points. The whole family. I read it twice and set the phone face down on the floor and finished my coffee, which was cold. Then I turned it back over. That is the part I'm not proud of. I turned it back over. The screenshots were multiplying. People I had gone to high school with. A cousin who had, at the last Christmas, asked me across the children's table whether I'd considered nursing, since medicine didn't work out. He'd posted the cover to his own page with the caption, "So proud of my cousin." I have the text he sent in 2023 that says something very different. I didn't reply to him. I didn't reply to any of them. Around 10, George called. My Uncle George, the carpenter, the one member of that family who has never once looked at his own hands like they were a disappointment.
Kid, he said.
His voice was rough. You're on the front of a magazine at the CVS on Route 9. I bought 4. Something in my chest loosened for the first time that morning. You didn't have to buy 4, Uncle George. One's going in a frame. A pause. Your father doesn't know yet. Or he didn't at 9. He does now. That was the open loop I couldn't close from where I sat. What was happening inside the hospital? I found out in pieces over the next 2 hours, the way you find out about weather in another city. Richard Bellamy, Dr. Bellamy, more than 4,000 cardiac surgeries, chief of his division, had walked into the physician's lounge that morning to a copy of the magazine already sitting on the coffee table. A resident, someone told George, someone young who didn't know the family rules, had held it up and asked him, "Is this your daughter? You never mentioned you had a daughter." Who? He never mentioned. 3 years I sat at the children's table, and the version of me that made the cover of a national magazine was a person he had never once mentioned. It's a strange thing, to be erased, and then to have the erasing become the scandal. My mother's part came later, and it came quieter. She started deleting Carol's tag. She commented, then deleted the comment, then commented again. I watched it happen in near real time, because 40 people had already screenshotted the first version, the one where she'd written we always supported her dreams. Nobody who had ever eaten dinner in that house believed it. That didn't stop it from being said. By early afternoon, my inbox held over 200 messages. Voicemails from numbers I hadn't saved. A LinkedIn request from Victoria's husband. A text from a woman who had, at a cousin's wedding, told me it was brave to keep going with the computer thing. Now she wanted to grab coffee. I answered no one. Not out of strategy. Maya would tell you strategy came later. That afternoon, I simply had nothing to say to people who had needed a magazine to tell them who I was. I was scrolling the wall of names, thumb moving on its own, when one of them made me stop. It wasn't a cousin. It wasn't a colleague. It was 3 years and a whole ruined dinner away from anything I expected. Nathan, my little brother, Harvard Med, 24, the last true believer at the adults' table. The message was 7 words long. Jimmy, I need to see you. Don't tell Mom and Dad. I didn't text Nathan back. Not yet. I set the phone on the counter, screen up, and stood there watching his name sit among the 200 others like a coin dropped into a fountain. My coffee had gone cold. I poured it out, made a fresh cup, and let the machine hiss while I decided what I was allowed to feel. The phone rang before I decided. Not Nathan. Uncle George. You awake? His voice had that low gravel it gets when he's been holding something in. In the background, I could hear the buzz of a table saw winding down, then silence. He'd stopped working to call me. George never stops working. I'm awake, I said. What is it? You sitting? George. He exhaled. Carol's boy, the anesthesiologist, works your father's floor. He texted me a picture. From the cafeteria. Somebody left a copy of that magazine on your dad's table. Just left it there. Face up. Your face up. I press my thumb into the seam of the counter. And there's this young doctor, 2nd year maybe, walks over with it. Whole room half listening the way rooms do. And this kid holds it out and says, George paused, and I could hear him getting the words exactly right, because he knew I'd want them exact. Dr. Bellamy, is this your daughter? How come you never mentioned her? The sawdust settled. I could almost smell it through the phone, that dry cedar smell of George's shop. What did he say? I asked. Nothing. That's the thing, Jimmy. 30-some years running that department. Man's never been quiet a day in his life, and he just folded the magazine over.
Slid it under his tray.
Said something about a page, and left half a sandwich. George's chair creaked. Carol's voice said. The whole table watched him go. I set my coffee down. I hadn't drunk any of it. Second cup in a row I'd made and abandoned. There's a joke in there about my whole family somewhere, but I wasn't laughing. Here's the part one won't pretend about. Some cold, exact thing in my chest opened 1 degree wider and let a little warmth in, and I did not feel proud of it, and I did not stop it either. More than 4,000 hearts. He'd opened more than 4,000 chests and closed them clean, and he couldn't say 8 words about mine. There's more, George said. Your mother. Go on. She's on Facebook trying to scrub it. But your cousins already shared it Tuesday. The whole family did, everybody bragging like they'd known all along. So now she's in the comments deleting, and the deleting's making it worse, because every time she pulls one down somebody screenshots it and says, "Why's Eleanor hiding her own kid?" A dry laugh. She reposted the same brag twice by accident. It's a mess, honey. It's a public mess. I walked to the window. Long Island City below me, Gray River, a barge crawling under the bridge with no hurry in the world. My phone buzzed against my ear, call waiting.
Mom.
3rd time since 6 a.m. Eastern. I let it ring through. Victoria unfollowed you. George added, quieter. Everywhere. This morning. Carol's boy noticed because he'd gone to look at your page and hers, and she dropped you clean off. Sister of the Year. I kept my eyes on the barge. She post anything? Not yet.
She will.
I said it before I'd thought it, and then I heard how sure I sounded, and I knew it was true. Victoria never lost quietly. When we were kids and I beat her at anything Scrabble once, exactly once, she flipped the board and called it a stupid game, and then spent a week explaining to our parents why she'd let me win. She'd been the neurosurgeon, the star, the one whose name they said like a prayer. And now a magazine had put my face over hers on the same shelf. That doesn't heal in Victoria. That organizes. Watch her, I told George. Not for me. Just watch what she does next. The phone buzzed again.
Mom.
I looked at it, this little rectangle lighting up with the woman who'd said Jimmy's still finding her way in front of 18 people for 3 years running, and I turned it face down on the sill. You're not going to talk to her? George asked. Not while she's panicking. People who panic don't apologize. They negotiate. George went quiet a moment. Then his voice dropped. Careful, the way you set down something that might break. But Jimmy, he said, your mother's on the phone with a reporter.
Right now.
I don't know what she's planning to do. Maya buzzed my office line at 4:03 on a Thursday and told me there was a kid in the lobby who wouldn't give his name.
He says you'll know him, she said.
He's got your jaw. I came out. Nathan was standing by the window with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the framed patent certificates like they were X-rays he didn't know how to read. He'd grown. The last time we'd spoken face-to-face was Christmas, when he'd passed me the salt without meeting my eyes. You didn't call first, I said. You wouldn't have said yes. I let him into the office and closed the door. He sat, then stood, then sat again. On my desk, the coffee I'd forgotten had gone cold and left a ring on a printout. He kept glancing at the Vault Chain logo on the wall. I've known for about 2 years, he said. I didn't move. Known what? That you're J.M. Bellamy. He almost smiled. You still sign the M with that flat top. You did it on my birthday card when I was 9. I saw a keynote slide with your signature on it, and I sat in the Countway Library and just stared at it. 2 years. He'd sat across from me at 4 holidays knowing and said nothing, and watched Dad call me a disgrace and said nothing, and I couldn't decide yet whether that was cowardice or mercy. Why didn't you tell them? I said. Because it was yours. He looked at the floor. And because if I told them, they'd take it. They'd take everything and put a Bellamy stamp on it. There it was. The thing I hadn't let myself want. I don't want your money, Jimmy. He said it fast, like he'd rehearsed it in the elevator. I need to tell somebody I don't want to be a doctor. I've never said that out loud. Not once. I say it in my head at 2 in the morning, and then I go take the shelf exams, and I get the highest score in my cohort, and everyone claps, and I want to throw up. The radiator ticked. Somewhere past the door, a keyboard was going. You're afraid you'll turn into him, I said. His head came up. How did you? because I spent 3 years afraid of the same thing. I pulled my chair around so there was no desk between us. Nathan, you don't need my permission. But if that's what you came for, you have it. Whatever you actually want. I will stand behind you, and I will not put a stamp on it. He pressed the heel of his hand against one eye and looked away until he had his face back. Then he laughed, wet and short. Uncle George said you'd say something like that. He said you're the only one of us who never lies about the important stuff. For one clean minute, I let myself believe the whole family wasn't the enemy. That George and this scared, brilliant kid were proof the poison hadn't reached everyone. Then Nathan said carefully, "There's something you should know." I waited. Mom and Victoria. They were on the phone Sunday in the kitchen, and I was in the pantry getting cereal, and they didn't hear me. He was picking at a thread on his cuff. They kept saying the word narrative. Mom said, "We need to get ahead of the narrative before she does." Victoria said something about how it looks better if you two are the ones who were hurt, that people love parents who tried. The radiator ticked again. My coffee ring had dried to a brown crescent. "They're going to tell a story," I said. "They're going to tell it first." He looked up at me, miserable. "I don't know what it is. I didn't want it to land on you cold." I thanked him. I gave him my private cell, the one 4 people have. I walked him to the elevator and watched the doors close on my little brother's tired, hopeful, frightened face, and I stood in the empty hallway and felt something old and cold settle back into my chest exactly where it had lived for 3 years. Get ahead of the narrative. My mother, who could smile at a woman's funeral and make the widow feel judged. I knew what she was capable of. I just didn't know the shape of it yet. That night I sat on my couch with the laptop warm on my knees and refreshed my name one more time before bed. The way you check a lock, is already turned. It had gone up 11 minutes earlier. Tech millionaire abandons devoted doctor family who sacrificed everything. And there, side by side, a photo of me laughing at a conference, and my father in scrubs, bent over an open chest, saving a stranger's life. I didn't sleep. By 4 in the morning, the article had 40,000 shares. I know because I counted, refreshing the number the way you press on a bruise. Every hour it grew. My father in his scrubs, patient, holy. The surgeon who'd held more than 4,000 hearts in his hands. Me, mid-laugh, champagne flute glossy in one hand, looking exactly like a woman who forgets where she came from. The comments were the part one hadn't braced for. Money changes people. Rich and heartless. Those parents worked their whole lives. She left medicine to play with pretend money, and now she's too good for family? I set the phone face down on the counter. Then I turned it back over. At 6:12 a.m. my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Diane Whitfield, the partner from Meridian who'd been quietly doing diligence on RAs. A smaller fund, but one we'd courted for 6 weeks. She never called before 9. "Jimmy, I'll be direct, because I respect you." Her voice was warm and terrible. "There's a story circulating. My team flagged it this morning. We take founder reputation seriously. Personal brand risk is a real line item now. I'm not pulling anything, but I need to understand the family situation before I bring this to committee Thursday." I heard myself say the calm thing. "It's a fabrication. My mother gave that interview." A pause. "Do you have anything on the record saying that?" I didn't. That was the whole architecture of the last 3 weeks. I had said nothing. On purpose. I had been so proud of saying nothing. "I'll think about how to respond," I told her. "Do it soon," she said. Silence reads a certain way. I hung up and stood in my kitchen and understood something I did not want to understand. For 3 years, when my mother introduced me as the daughter still finding her path, I had swallowed it. At the anniversary, when my father pointed at the door in front of all 18 guests, I had put down a full glass of champagne and thanked him for dinner and left without raising my voice. I had thought that restraint was strength. I had thought dignity meant refusing to fight in their mud. But you cannot leave a blank page next to people who write for a living. My mother had done what she always did, built the perfect version, and handed it to a stranger with a byline. Only this time I'd given her the empty space to write in. I called Maya. She picked up on the first ring, already awake. I saw it, she said. I've been up. Jimmy, listen to me. I'm handling it. I don't want to feed it. If we respond, we look defensive. We look like we're punching down at a 60-year-old doctor. Stop. She said it flat. In 4 years of building this company through 2 near bankruptcies, Maya had never once said stop to me. I need you to hear this and not be reasonable for 1 second. Your silence is not protecting you. It's protecting them. That's what it was always doing. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere below the window, a garbage truck backed up, beeping into the gray light. Every day you say nothing. Maya went on, quieter now. Your mother's version becomes the record. You think you're above the story. You're not above it. You're just absent from it. And absence is a shape people fill in with whatever they already believed about you. I didn't answer. On my laptop, I pulled up the article again and made myself read past the photo this time. My mother's quotes. We only ever wanted her to have a stable life. We opened our home, our name, everything. She calls it success. We call it a broken family. And then, near the bottom, one line that wasn't my mother's cadence at all. Cooler. Surgical. Some people confuse cutting people off with strength. I read it 3 times. That wasn't Eleanor. My mother wounds with sugar. This was a scalpel held steady by someone who'd trained for 14 years to hold one steady. Victoria had unfollowed me across every platform a week ago. I'd told myself she was hurt, or jealous, or both, and that it would pass. It hadn't passed. It had gone to work. Maya, I said slowly. The last quote. That's not my mother. That's Victoria. I heard her breath change. Then this isn't a story anymore. It's a campaign. I opened the funds data room. Our valuation indicator, the soft internal number Meridian tracked during diligence, updated by their model against comparable rounds and, apparently, sentiment, had ticked down. Not a crash. 182 down to 171. $11 million, gone in a single morning, on the strength of a story my mother told a reporter over the phone. $11 million. Because I was too dignified to speak. Here is the thing about being the calm one for 3 years. You get very good at absorbing. You learn that if you just hold still, the moment passes and no glass gets broken. It had worked at every holiday. It had worked at the anniversary. I had left that dinner feeling almost weightless, thinking I'd won by refusing to bleed where they could see. And I had handed them 3 weeks of silence to sharpen into a knife. I closed the article. I closed the data room. I looked at that number one more time, 171, down 11 in a day, and I felt my heart do the thing it does when a figure finally matches something true. Not fear. Recognition. I turned my phone off completely. The screen went black and gave me back my own reflection in the glass. Okay, I said to Maya. Then I'll tell my own story. But with evidence, not tears. I called Maya at 6:12 the next morning. Set the Sequoia meeting, I said. This week. And pull the Q3 numbers, the clean deck. All of it. There was a pause on the line, the sound of her sitting up in bed. You sure? Meridian's still spooked. Meridian follows. They don't lead. I was already at my kitchen counter. Laptop open. The screen the only light in the apartment. Diane Whitfield at Sequoia asked for first look in April.
I said no then.
I'm saying yes now. 3 days later, I sat in a glass conference room on Sand Hill Road with 4 partners across a table wide enough to land a plane on. Diane sat in the middle. She was maybe 50, silver hair cut sharp, a legal pad in front of her with nothing written on it yet. That empty pad scared me more than any question could. We went through it. The 3.3 million users. The 18 patents. The retention curve that didn't sag, where every competitor's did. I watched Diane's pen finally move, small ticks in the margin, and I let myself breathe for the first time in 20 minutes. Then the youngest partner, a man named Prakash, leaned back. There's a family situation in the press, he said. The interview your mother gave. Investors read that as instability. Talk to me about the person, not the company. The room went quiet. Somewhere a laptop fan spun up. I felt the old reflex rise, the one that had walked me out of my parents' house without a word. I didn't reach for it. You want to know if I'll fold under public pressure, I said.
Here's my answer.
My family called me a disgrace for 3 years. I built this while they thought I was playing games on a computer. I raised $49,000 to start. That's the number. $49,000 and a co-founder who slept on my floor. I slid one page across the table. That's my personal position. Verify it. Then ask yourself whether a woman who did that while being humiliated at holiday dinners is going to crack because a newspaper printed my mother's version. Diane looked at the page for a long time. When she looked up, something in her face had changed. 42.5, she said quietly. Verified this morning. She capped her pen. We'll lead the round. The term sheet came Friday. $50 million. $180 million valuation. I read the number 3 times on my phone in the parking garage before it felt real, and even then it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a door I could finally close from the inside. I didn't celebrate. I got to work on the part that mattered. The next Monday, I signed 2 things at my kitchen counter with the same pen. The first created a scholarship fund. $5 million for women going into technology, the ones told they were wasting their potential, the ones seated at the children's table. The second was a $2 million donation to a hospital. Maya read the second document over my shoulder.
Brooklyn, she said.
Not.
No. Jimmy. His hospital would have been the headline.
Founder-daughter gives back to father's institution. The story writes itself. I know exactly what story that writes. I clicked send on the wire authorization. A children's hospital in Brooklyn, understaffed, underfunded, 40 minutes, and a whole world away from the cardiac wing where my father had opened more than 4,000 chests. That's why it's Brooklyn. Maya was quiet a moment. You want him to notice. I want him to count the miles, I said. And I want him to do it alone. She didn't argue after that. She understood. Some cuts are quieter when you never explain them out loud, and I was saving that explanation for a room I hadn't walked into yet. The press release went out Thursday at noon. I watched the coverage turn in real time, the way you watch weather move across a radar map. The victim interview my mother had planted was 3 days old now, already yellowing. You cannot argue with $50 million and $7 million given away. Numbers don't cry. They just sit there, true, while the manufactured stories curdle beside them. By Thursday night, the comment sections had flipped. The same accounts that called me ungrateful were now writing about the scholarship. One woman posted that she'd applied within an hour of the fund opening. I read that one twice and set the phone down. I made tea. I stood at the window looking out at the lights across the river, and for the first time in weeks the noise in my chest had gone still. I had done it the only way I knew how. Not with the megaphone. With the ledger. At 9:40, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maya had left an hour before. I set down my mug and walked to the panel by the door, and I tapped the little screen that showed the camera in the hall. My father stood there in his good coat. My mother beside him, hair done, lipstick fresh. And in my father's hand, held out slightly toward the door like an offering, was a bottle of wine. The expensive kind. The kind he brought to people he wanted something from. I didn't buzz them up right away. I stood at the intercom and watched the small gray screen, my mother adjusting her scarf, my father holding the bottle by the neck like a surgical instrument. 9:40 at night. I let 10 seconds pass. Then I pressed the button and said, "Come up." The elevator in my building is slow. It gave me time to move the 2 coffee mugs off the counter and set out nothing to replace them. When the knock came, I opened the door and did not step back to let them in. My father did that himself, walking past me into the living room like he'd been invited 100 times. "There she is," he said. "My brilliant girl." The words landed somewhere behind my ribs and just sat there cold. I had not been his brilliant girl at the anniversary. I had been the Bellamy family disgrace, in front of 18 people. Over a glass of champagne I never touched. "Sit," I said. They sat. My mother arranged herself on the edge of the couch, knees together, the way she sat in waiting rooms. "We saw the news," she began.
Forbes.
"The funding. $50 million, Jimmy. We had no idea." She laughed, light and practiced. "You never told us anything." "I told you for 3 years," I said. "You called it playing games." My father set the bottle on my coffee table. He hadn't uncorked it. He never intended to. "Let's not relitigate," he said. "We came here as a family to talk about the future." He leaned forward. "There's a cardiac wing at Mercy that's been trying to fund a research center for a decade. The Bellamy name has weight there. Yours now, it has a different kind of weight. Together." "Together," I repeated. "A family foundation," my mother said quickly. "The Bellamy Center. Your father's 40 years of surgery, over 4,000 hearts, and your technology. Think of what that says. 3 generations of medicine, and now this." I looked at the bottle on the table.
Then at both of them.
"You want me to put our name on a building?" I said. "The name Dad used at his own anniversary to throw me out of the house." "Jimmy." "I gave $2 million 3 days ago," I said. "To a children's hospital in Brooklyn. Not Mercy. Not Dad's hospital." I watched that register, the small tightening around my father's mouth. "You want to know why Brooklyn?" Neither of them answered. "Because I wanted the money to go somewhere that never once made me feel like a mistake. Brooklyn didn't seat me at a children's table for 3 years. Brooklyn didn't introduce me at parties as the daughter who's still finding her way." My voice stayed level. That was the part one thing they hadn't prepared for. I chose it on purpose. Every dollar of it. My mother's hand moved to her scarf again.
"That interview," she said.
"The one with the reporter. That got away from us. Victoria was upset, and things were said, and it came out wrong." "You called a journalist," I said. 4 days after Forbes. "You built a story where you were the heartbroken parents, and I was the ungrateful daughter who forgot where she came from. There was a line in it about surgical precision being a discipline I never learned. That was Victoria's sentence. I'd know her voice anywhere." Silence. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Somewhere below, a car door shut. "I lost $11 million in company valuation the day that piece ran," I said. "You understand? Your story about being victims cost me $11 million in one afternoon. And I still didn't call a reporter back. I let the numbers speak instead." My father stood up. Here it came, the thing I'd waited 3 years to see whether he'd ever do. "We came here to make peace," he said, and his voice climbed. "You think you're the only one who suffered? Do you know what it's been like at that hospital? A 29-year-old resident handing me a magazine and asking why I never mentioned my own daughter." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly what that was like. Uncle George told me. You slid the magazine under a stack of charts and left the room." That stopped him. He hadn't known George saw. He sat back down. Slower this time. Something went out of him, not softness, exactly. More like a man realizing the door he was leaning on had already been locked from the other side. "Not one of you has said the word sorry," I said. "You've said congratulations. You've said brilliant girl. You've said family foundation. You have not said I'm sorry, and I've been listening very carefully." My mother opened her mouth.
Closed it.
She was, I think, assembling one, but assembling it the way you'd assemble a statement for a deposition, and I watched her do it, and that was answer enough. "I'd like you to go now," I said. I walked to the door and opened it. The hallway light was too bright. It always is at night. "Thank you for coming." My father picked up the bottle. He hadn't left it after all. At the threshold he stopped, close enough that I could smell the cologne he'd worn to church my entire childhood. His eyes found mine, and for 1 second I thought he might actually say it. "You're going to smear this family in public," he said. It wasn't quite a question. In front of everyone. I held the door. "No," I said. "I'm just going to stop covering for you. I have a talk next week. You're welcome to come and listen." The conference organizers had booked me for the 8:40 keynote slot, and I arrived at the Javits Center at 7 with a black coffee I never drank. Backstage smelled like cold metal and hairspray. A young woman clipped a microphone pack to the waistband of my slacks and told me the live stream had 11,000 people already queued. I nodded. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything. Maya found me by the curtain. She was holding her phone the way you hold something that might bite. "George is here," she said. "Row 9. And he's not alone. Nathan." Nathan. And 3 men I don't recognize, all wearing hospital lanyards. Presbyterian. My father's hospital. I let that sit in my chest for a second, then set the coffee down on the equipment case. "Good," I said. "Then everyone who needs to hear this is in the room."
I want to be clear about something.
I did not build this talk to hurt anyone. I had rewritten it 4 times the night before, and each time I cut a name. You don't need names when the truth is specific enough. The stage lights were hotter than I expected. I could see maybe the first 10 rows before the darkness swallowed the rest. A wall of faces, phones raised. The small red eye of the broadcast camera at the back like a period at the end of a sentence not yet written. I found George in row 9. He gave me a small nod, the same one he'd given me across a dinner table for 3 years while everyone else looked away. I started with the number. $49,000, I said. That's what I had in a savings account in the spring of 2022. I just walked out of my 3rd year of medical school. My family called it the worst decision of my life. One of them called it something else. I let the silence do the work. He called me a disgrace. In front of 18 people. For, and I'm quoting, playing with fake money on a computer. A ripple went through the front rows. Somebody laughed, the nervous kind. I didn't smile. "That fake money," I said, "now protects 3.3 million people's assets. It holds 18 patents. And the person he was so ashamed of was, at that exact moment, sitting on a company he would have been proud to claim if he'd bothered to ask a single question." I did not look toward row 9. I looked at the students. There were hundreds of them. I could tell by the backpacks, by the way they leaned forward instead of back. I built it under a different name so no one could connect the dropout to the founder. I signed everything J.M. Bellamy. I told myself that was strategy. It wasn't. It was armor. And here's what I learned about armor. I paused. It keeps out the people who'd hurt you. It also keeps out the people who'd know you. Somewhere in the dark, a phone screen went black and stayed black. I didn't know yet whose it was. I'd find out later, from George, that my mother had been watching from her kitchen and had turned the stream off at exactly that line, then sat in the quiet for a long time. I moved to the part I'd been afraid of. For weeks I stayed silent while a story was written about me. A story where I was the ungrateful daughter and everyone else was the wounded party. I thought silence was dignity. My co-founder told me the truth. "I found Maya at the wings," she said, "and I'll never forget it. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the people who need you quiet." That got the room. I heard it move. So I stopped being quiet. I announced the expansion then, the scholarship fund, $5 million, doubling to reach 200 women in technology in the next cycle, applications opening that morning. The screen behind me lit with the number. Applause came in a wave, and I let it pass over me without leaning into it. Then I said the last thing. I'd written it on a hotel notepad at 2 in the morning and read it aloud to an empty room to make sure it wouldn't crack in my throat. Somebody spent 3 years telling me I wasn't enough. And for a while I set myself on fire trying to give them light. So here's the only advice I have that's worth the ticket price. I looked, finally, toward the back of the room, toward the rows I couldn't see. Don't burn yourself down to keep other people warm. If they only love the version of you that's on fire, they were never warm to begin with. They were just cold. The room stood. It happened all at once, the way a field of grass moves under wind, the front rows first, then the middle, then a rising I felt in my sternum before I understood what it was. Students on their feet. Investors on their feet. And in row 9, George standing with both hands over his mouth and Nathan beside him, not clapping, just staring at me with something on his face I hadn't seen since we were kids. I found out afterward what I couldn't see from the stage. 3 seats in the back row. Second section. A man in a gray blazer who had come in late and left before the lights came up. He hadn't stood. He hadn't spoken. George told me he'd sat with his jaw working, his hands flat on his knees, and when the room rose around him, he'd stayed down like a stone in a river. My father, a man with more than 4,000 heart surgeries behind his hands, George said, and it was the first time in his life he'd watched Richard Bellamy have nothing to say. I walked off stage left. Maya grabbed my arm and said something I didn't hear. The mic pack was still buzzing against my hip. Someone handed me my phone. There was a text on the screen. From Nathan. Sent 4 minutes ago while I was still talking while the room was still standing. I read it twice. I dropped out of med school. Thank you for going first. Nathan's text was 3 words long. I read it standing in the wings at the Javits Center, and I didn't answer right away. I put the phone in my jacket pocket and let the applause finish without me. That was 6 months ago. This morning I'm in the vault chain office at 7:40 before anyone else, because the espresso machine is the only thing in this building that doesn't want something from me. Maya finds me there. She sets a printout on the counter, face up, and taps one line with her finger. 42.5, she says. As of the close yesterday. The number is $42.5 million. My personal portfolio. I look at it the way you'd look at weather, real but not something I did on purpose this morning. 3 years ago, the same account held $49,000, and a fear I never said out loud. I fold the paper in half and put it in a drawer. You're not going to frame it? She asks. I framed the first one, I say. The 49K screenshot. It's on the wall behind my desk, and nobody who visits knows what it is. The scholarship fund closed its first cycle in April. 12 women, tech, full tuition. I read every application myself. One of them, a girl named Priya from Newark, wrote a single line in her essay that I still have on a sticky note on my monitor. I don't have anyone in my family who does this, so I'll have to be the one. I approved her before I finished the paragraph. Nathan comes by the office now. Not in secret anymore. He switched his major in January, bioengineering, then he dropped even that and went to design, and when he told our parents there was a version of the story where the roof came off. There wasn't. Richard Bellamy, who has done more than 4,000 open heart surgeries, said, "We'll discuss it at Christmas," and then never did. Nathan told me this on my couch, eating cereal at midnight, and he was laughing, which is the part that mattered. He can't cut me off, Nathan said. I'm not the one with the money anymore. Then he looked at me, embarrassed.
See?
Don't be, I said. It's the most honest thing anyone in the family said in years. Uncle George calls every Sunday. He's 66 and building a cradle for a great niece I've never met, and he narrates the joinery to me like it's a heist. He's the one who told me, weeks after the conference, that Richard has stopped bringing it up at the hospital, that people just quietly stopped asking. He got small about it, George said. Not sorry. Small. I understood the difference. I've spent my life on the wrong side of it. My parents text. Twice, maybe, since the conference. A birthday. A forwarded article about a Bellamy cousin's engagement, no message attached, as if the link itself were an olive branch and I was supposed to read it as one. I answered congrats to them and nothing else. Victoria has not said one word to me since the night she unfollowed. My neurosurgeon sister, who used to correct my grammar at the children's table, has decided silence is a scalpel. It isn't. It's just silence.
I slip fine.
I want to tell you I forgave them, and the forgiveness set me free. I didn't, and it didn't need to. Here is the thing nobody explains. You can close a door gently and still close it all the way. The last scene I'll give you is small. 2 weeks ago, I flew to Brooklyn for the ribbon at the Children's Hospital, the $2 million wing, the one I deliberately did not name after anyone. A boy of about 7, recovering from something his mother could barely say, asked me what I did. Not what I was worth. What I did. I build locks, I told him. So people can't take what's yours. He thought about that with the seriousness only children can afford. Even from your own house? His mother went pale. I laughed for the first time in a way that reached the bottom of me. Especially then, I said. That's the whole story. My father called me the disgrace of the Bellamy family for playing with fake money on a computer in front of 18 people, and I set down a full glass of champagne and walked out. Forbes did the rest, Not me, not revenge, just the truth arriving on its own schedule and refusing to leave. Here is what I know now, and it's the only thing I'll ask you to carry out of this. You do not have to burn yourself to keep other people warm. Not your family. Not anyone. A person who only loves you once you're on a magazine cover was never measuring you. They were measuring the cover. Set the glass down. Say thank you for the dinner. And walk toward the thing that's actually yours.